Welcome to today's live event on Anxiety Crusher. I started this because of the amount of concern and angst I'm seeing out there. People talking about unable to regulate the solutions that they've used in the past don't seem to be working anymore. Now, the 7 step reset is designed for transformation because when you go from status quo to your quest and take that nice upward trajectory, it does require a new identity. It turns out that that same transformation into that new identity is what's needed to be able to crush anxiety. Stop it before it starts. This is not mental health. This is about taking the everyday kind of anxiety and putting it in its place, not because you don't experience life or you choose not to experience life, but because you have agency and personal leadership yourself. And that's the 7 step reset. Today's going to be an interesting one because I'm on the fifth step of the 7 step process. And the first step and the fifth step are the two biggest ones that make a difference. People spend more time on the sixth step, which is action, and not enough time on the seventh step, which is resetting. But of course, the steps one and two get ignored. So we're going to talk about that. I'll go through the 7 step overview, and I'll introduce the fifth step of how it's going to work. Now, if you go out to, and I'll put this on the in the chat. If you go out to 7stepreset.com/live, you will see the last video. So each video from the day before is right there, and then today's video is next to it. Tomorrow, today's video moves over to the previous one, and some of them will go below, and I use highlighted right now because I'm doing one step at a time. Those will be there, so we have all the steps: one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. But you can also see it on the platform. So if you may be watching this on a YouTube or Facebook platform, whatever platform you're on, the past videos are on there as well. I go live every day, and I do have availability to come on stage. So you can come on stage, excuse me, you can come on stage and we can talk. So, like group coaching, or you can just ask your question in the chat. At the end, I will see what's in the chat, and I will answer those questions. But again, you're welcome to come on, especially coaches and counselors, because you all have some way that works. You've landed on something that you know works. That's your model of the world in this space, and I would love to have you come on and we can have a conversation. This is not about a debate about somebody being wrong or right. It's about, if you disagree with me, then I disagree with me until we figure out who's missing information. And through that approach, we just get better. And here's the link for you to come on stage. I'll put that in the chat as well. And there's that link. Now, first of all, a quick review. So the 7 step process, as I already mentioned, is from the transformation work I do. So I have a 90-day transformation program where I help people transform into the identity that they need to have for their quest. It's very quest or purpose or vision specific. So I don't do this just to, teach somebody what to do. You have to actually apply it because I want them to build the new habits, and that's the foundation. Is what we're doing is creating the right habits. When you have habits, you have automaticity, and what we want is for the automaticity to be working for us. And it's not that it works against us, It's that the automaticity we have is based on our conditioning from 0 to 7. And that conditioning was for a prior place and time. Now, a lot of neuroscience makes sense when you look at it through the lens of a hunter gatherer. So, 10,000 years or more, we were on this earth hunting and gathering, and the system evolved to what it is today. Now, the world we know today has been around for 1,000 years, maybe 2,000 years, depending on what reference you're using, maybe 3,000 years. But for example, we've only been the car as we know it today has been less than 200 years. And so what we deal with today, let alone computers, right? So what we deal with today is very different than what we had from 0 to 7. And that's why I call it a reset, because we're resetting the conditioning not to become somebody different, but it's a different identity. And that identity is based on the current times. So in 1970, Moore's Law was stated that technology will double every 18 months. And if you know anything about exponential curves, you know that after 20 doublings, you're going to be on the very vertical part of that exponential curve. And that's where we are. This is why AI was this big deal a few years ago, and it still is. But think about how many iterations there have been of AI. We're on Chat GPT 5, and each iteration is less expensive. And then there are other artificial intelligence options that are coming up that cost much less than OpenAI. And that's because we're on this very vertical part of the curve. So now the focus is on chips, and you have artificial intelligence companies selling to each other. That's keeping the market propped up. The point is, the VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, is not going away. It's here to stay because we are on this very vertical part of the curve. And now technology, while it is a solution in a way, it's more of an amplifier. So it helps people become who they are faster, if you will. Like money's an amplifier. Now, the 7 step reset. So I have a couple of examples here. First, let me put up the overview. All right, these are the 7 steps right here. Now, underneath, I just give an example. So the way this is laid out is the 7 step reset for your life design. As I said, it's very purpose specific, very quest specific. The 33,000 daily stimulus response cycles, this is what's happening. So we're awake about 65,000 seconds a day, but every other second or so, we're making a decision. Now, you're not making that many decisions in a day. You're not conscious of that. This is the 95% of our lives is run by habit. So while it's called decisions, and everything I say, you can Google and you can make your own decisions about it. The 33,000 decisions are stimulus response cycles, at least the majority of them. So let's say that maybe 1,000 or 1,500 are conscious, and then the other 33,000, 32,000 or so are habitual. Because they're happening so fast, and because in this first step you have priming, and in this last step we have resetting the mindfulness, getting back to status quo. If you don't do this, then we are primed automatically for that next set. And this is where the day can get away from you. People have seen that experience. They start off and something bad happens, they get a ticket, a flat, someone yells at them, whatever, and now that the day is kind of messed up. It's because they went into this thing. And in step 5, which is what we'll be talking about today, if you get emotionally hijacked and you don't deal with that emotion as energy and motion and process it, that hijacked emotion can become a feeling. If it becomes a feeling, it's now lodged in your network of neurons, and now it's accessible to have associations wired to it. In other words, let the emotion pass through, it's gone, and you're back to homeostasis. Harbor, dwell on, try to suppress that emotion, it turns into a neurochemical event, and now it's part of your system. So we don't want that to happen. But in order to do that, you have to master this 7-step process. Step one: beliefs, neuroplasticity, priming, mindset, and physiology. Very, very important step. And here's why today is so important. Step one is 100% in your control. Now, I'm not saying the outcome is 100% in your control, but step one, what you believe, what you choose to believe, 100%. How you apply neuroplasticity, which is essentially habit change, 100%. Priming, whether you prime yourself or not, and whether or not you allow yourself to be susceptible to priming from external, 100%. Now, you may not have the skills to do it, but those skills are acquirable. And because you have command over neuroplasticity, you can set those habits. Mindset, and it's not just being in a growth mindset, it's being able to recognize when you've slipped into a fixed mindset or when a fixed mindset area has slipped into the equation so that you can get back to a growth mindset quickly. It doesn't make sense to live in a fixed mindset. You can have a growth mindset and still make a choice. I'm not going to do that. So having a growth mindset doesn't mean that you are no longer having agency and personal leadership. And then physiology, probably one of the more important ones here, is certainly for correcting things in the moment. You can have a courageous physiology or a defeated physiology, and that's 100% choice. You can also choose to hydrate or not. You can choose to breathe deeply or not. So step one is 100% in our control, and I will show you that step five, getting back to homeostasis with your emotions, is 100% in our control. So step two is your state. And this is a check-in. This is, where am I? Because we're preparing ourselves every other second. We're preparing ourselves for this next stimulus that's going to come. So where am I? Mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. What's my state? What is my self-talk like? That's the self-image. So this is your state and your self-image, because those are going to impact how you respond to that stimulus when it comes. And another stimulus is coming. As a matter of fact, this is saying 33,000 decisions per day. But if you Google something like how many micro stimulus response cycles, you may see as many as 100,000 per day, multiple ones per second. You can Google how many micro stimulus response cycles happen in a second, and you'll see something more than one. It depends on your search history, etc. That number is telling you that with 65,000 seconds that we're awake, we can easily be having 100,000 of these over and over and over. And if we're not able to reset from a hijacked emotion or a triggered state, then we are already impacting our priming, we're already impacting our mindset, and we're already impacting our physiology. Do that 3,000 times, and that's only 1 hour that, less, just over an hour that's already passed for the day. So then step two is the state. Where are we? Step three, and you can go back and look at these. I can't go into detail on each one and still give the current one its full attention. But step three is where the change happens. Step one is in our control. Step five is in our control. Step three is where the change happens. And this doesn't have to be. I recommend this being conditioned in because it has to happen at the habit level. The habit level is so fast. This is a quarter of a second because the network of neurons, aka subconscious, processes at 11 million bits per second, has a reaction time of about a quarter of a second. So within a quarter of a second, the subconscious, the network of neurons, is off and running. Neurons that fire together wire together. So these associations from the past, largely set from age 0 to 7, tweaked in our teens, and then locked in as our model of the world in our 20s when the prefrontal cortex was formed by age 27. That prefrontal cortex has an additional 20 billion neurons. So we have 100 billion neurons total. The 20 billion in the prefrontal cortex did not fully develop until our 20s. And that's why by 35, you feel like everything is by habit, because that automatic improvement just by showing up that you got in your 20s, it doesn't happen anymore because the neurons are set, and you don't have the excess neurotransmitter necessary to create these habits as easily as you did in the 20s. In the 20s, the threshold for deep practice was low, and the threshold for myelination was low, and the threshold for activating new neural pathways was low. So all of those made it easy in our 20s to rely on willpower. Willpower wanes with use. It wanes with decisions, and it wanes throughout the day. And if you rely on willpower like you did in your 20s, it's easy to get frustrated by the time you're 35 and you just give up and you succumb to the habits. That's my view of what happens with people. This is a quarter of a second. And then a quarter of a second later, you have step 4, response. So this is, as I said, where the change actually happens. You want to condition in different ways of reacting, and then you want to condition in different ways of responding, and part of that is how you read the reaction. So this is where we spend some time, and again, you can go back. Yesterday I did step 4, response. The day before that, Friday, I did step 3. So you could see those by going lower on the platform, and all of them are about 45 minutes or so, so you'll be able to look at the time to see which ones they are. Now, today we're going to go into the emotional step, and this is about modulation. And I use the word modulation because it's more active and it's something that we're doing up and down, because we don't want to ever fall into suppressing emotions. Because when you suppress the emotion, this is happening at the habit level, and emotions in general get suppressed, number one, which means you limit your ability to experience joy. But the other thing is, if it's an emotion that's there to help save your life, or so the subconscious thinks, then the more you suppress it, it's because it's existential in the central nervous system's point of view. Because it's existential, it's always going to find more energy to overcome your suppression. You suppress it, it's going to find more energy to overcome your suppression. This is why you can see a person get wound up between their willpower and their I don't want power, and they get wound up so tight, and they get tension, and people get illness, and so many ailments occur because we're not letting that emotion process. Now, step 6 is action, and this is where we have to make different choices. So I often say to know and not do is to not know. More accurate is to know and not do is not much better than not knowing. But you get the point. And here, if this is where the change happens in steps 3 and 4, we stop the triggering here in step 5, or we modulate the emotion in step 5, and then in step 6 we execute. And it's your choice to do what you've always done or to do something different. That's why I say this is such an important step. You can, if you set your identity first, this action will automatically start to follow. And that's a good time for me to go to the 7 fitness areas or 7 performance areas. Oh, I just erased. I deleted that slide. Uh, I must have hit X instead of expand. Okay. 7 performance areas: mental, physical, spiritual. So that's the left side. This is in our control, 100%. So this is all basically encompassed in step 1. When you do the beliefs, the priming, the beliefs, the neuroplasticity, the priming, the mindset, the physiology, that's all happening right here. And then emotional, I call this the gateway to the right side. This is 100% in our control, no question about it. This is also in our control, but we walk around with these buttons that people can see and push, metaphorically speaking. They can push these buttons, and then we're emotionally hijacked. Advertisers do it, politicians do it, people who want things from you do it, bad actors do it. If you don't have a way of modulating your emotions and also recognizing when it's coming, that's your self priming versus external priming, then we get hijacked. And what we wanted in our relationships, professional, financial, we have problems. Now, this is a be, do, have. Most people start out with, I want this relationship, I want this career, I want this much money. And they start here and they don't become the person that's needed. That could lead to shortcuts. It could even lead to corruption, right? If somebody's morals are not there, because they're looking to get here faster and they're looking around and other people are getting there faster and it's not enough. And when you focus on this first, I'm not guaranteeing that you can have anything that you want. You can have any outcome that you want. That's not my guarantee. My guarantee is that you can become the person you want to become by working on all 7 steps. But in step 1 and step 5, that's where we stop the madness. Steps 3 and 4, because this is happening 33,000 times a day, steps 3 and 4 is where we make the actual changes. And then this is why it's so important, because this is what's happening 33,000 times a day. We have a pre-stimulus, then we have the conditioned reaction, and then we have a response. And that response is preparing us for that next pre-stimulus, the conditioned reaction, the response. If you don't get a handle on this is that idea. You wake up and you don't know what's going to hit you. The first thing hits you, and then you hang on and hope for the whole day. Or you end up with the middle of the day, you're having a bad day, you don't know how to get out of it. Or you are hijacked early on. I know that in sales, it's very easy for a, a person meaning well to say something to a salesperson early in the day, and that kind of messes up their flow. Here's a salesman, he's or a saleswoman. They've been driving in the car, doing affirmations. They come in ready to go, and they're just gung ho, ready, primed. And the sales manager comes to them and reminds them of something bad that they've done, and that now they need to talk to him at the end of the day. And now this person's all that work, they are perhaps given a haircut, and now they're operating at 80 or 90% of effectiveness. So this is a very, very important step here, and people don't even know that they're doing this. That's why I talk about dynamic leadership. You have to always make sure you are uplifting the autonomy, competence, and relatedness of the people if you want to get the results. So that's what we're going to talk about now. Let me move over. We're going to stop sharing the screen, and I will go over to the pad now. All right. So this is what I did last week. I started last week. I took a pause on going through the entire 7-step process every day, and because now the information is out there, you can look at it. And this is what I laid out. So there's your beliefs, neuroplasticity, priming, mindset, physiology. There's your second step, the state. This is the third step, where we have the quarter of a second. And we break this into 3 parts, by the way. So that's 250 milliseconds. You got about 100 milliseconds on the front end and 100 milliseconds on the back end. And in the middle, you have your 50 to 100 milliseconds where you're actually doing the work. And this is why habit change is so difficult, because people don't recognize the difference between the network of neurons, aka subconscious, processes at 11 million bits per second, versus the conscious mind, which only processes at 50 bits per second. And that quarter of a second gap. So in that quarter of a second gap, by the time the conscious mind comes online, the subconscious has already processed 2 to 4 million bits of information, and the subconscious mind doesn't have a chance. So not only do you need to change how that handoff happens, you also need to give yourself at least a quarter of this, at least a quarter of a second. So I recommend you don't let your response equal your reaction, and then when you do have the chance to respond, don't respond right away. Give yourself another quarter of a second. It's 250 milliseconds. You don't even notice it. But that quarter of a second allows you to process 12 and a half bits of information, and using the handoff that we teach. Through that handoff, you're now able to assess it. So the short version is the handoff is like the first step of problem solving, clearly to identify the problem. As you get better and better with this, you'll actually have the conditioning step looking at it through the lens of either critical thinking or first principles thinking. And then we have step 4. So this was step 3, right? And I talk about the pre and the post. That's all step 3. We have the pre part and the post part. Then you have inside of it, and there's things that we can do. So we condition all of this in, and by conditioning it in, that's what I talk about. That's what I mean when I talk about putting the automaticity to work for you. And then we have step 4. And I covered a few things like visualization, implementation, intention, reframing, deep practice, and also the positivity exercise is one of the tools we use to retrain the subconscious. This was talking about coherence and the impact when you become incoherent, or when you have a lack of coherence. And then here's that quarter of a step. This is step 4, right? The quarter of a step. I said, let's not respond right away. Let's give ourselves another quarter of a second. So now you have 3/4 of a second from the stimulus to when you are ready to take action. 3/4 of a second has elapsed. That's maybe a half second more than what you're used to. A half second is nothing. In the context, it feels like forever because the subconscious is processing so quickly. But if you've ever done that count to 3 before responding, that's 3 seconds. And it still doesn't seem bad, especially if you get in the habit of putting on a reflective face during this little pause. And you don't have to respond at a half second. The half second is just to quickly know what you'll see in action. Am I going to do it? Meaning what the reaction is. Delay it, think about it, come back to it. Delegate it, give it to somebody else, and maybe you delegate it to artificial intelligence, or then discard it. We're just going to disregard this one because it doesn't matter. Remember, most of your conditioning comes from 0 to 7, so there's a lot of reactions that are just completely wrong, and those are the ones we're just going to ignore. I also made the point yesterday that you is different than your associations. Your associations are your behaviors and your habits, and those associations show or display or present your personality. And the you and your personality are not the same. You can change your behaviors, which means you can change your personality. This is the whole identity. And then we talk about being proactive, and I already mentioned I don't want power. So I don't want power is something that we develop as a survival mechanism, and it competes oftentimes with our willpower. So we're saying, I want to do this, but you have a thing in there that conflicts with the I don't want power. Now, today, what we're going to do is look at the emotional area, step 5. So remember, here we had a response. But part of that response is a check-in. That check-in is simply, am I okay? Am I being triggered? Is what's coming up for me? What's the initial, and that's in that 12 and a half, or I should say that's in that quarter second. That's inside that quarter second that we're making that assessment over here in the response. Remember I said give yourself an extra quarter second. So that first quarter second, you do a quick check-in, and then you compare what you want to respond versus what you're getting from the subconscious. And now we have the emotional modulation. And the next step, and this is where we either do it or we delay it. So you're taking charge of your 33,000 decisions, not all of them. I will say I am not interested in having my decisions all be conscious. I don't have that bandwidth. I'm okay with 95% being by habit. I'm probably more living into like 85 to 90% because I do spend time contemplating and thinking, and I just ignore a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things I just ignore. So I'm reducing the number, total number. So it's not 33,000 because I consciously ignore many, I exclude them. And then of those that I am allowing in, I am taking time to understand more about each one. It depends on what it is and who I'm interacting with and what's coming up for me. Let's fix this up a little bit. All right. So in the emotional modulation, the here's what we're talking about. I call this the anxiety crusher. If you just think about how often do you experience anxiety on a daily basis? How often do you experience anxiety? And come up with a number. And if you could reduce that in half, does that change your quality of life? Suppose you could eliminate it altogether. Does that change your quality of life? I would say yes, it does. And so part of the process of modulation is to remove the a large portion of the anxiety that we're experiencing. So this is not about suppressing it. It's not about going into your past and doing this work. This is about real time adjusting the anxiety now. Dr. Joan Rosenberg, in her book, and I recommend reading this book or listening to it, 90 Seconds to a Life You Love. She talks about this and she's coined the term the Rosenberg reset. And the Rosenberg reset is to reset your emotions. And her a big point that's missed is that if all your emotions generalize up to anxiety, then we walk around fearing this anxiety thing happening. She has 8 emotions. She talks about 8 emotions: sadness and shame. Now, I want you to think about something. Sadness is is an emotion. These are uncomfortable emotions. I don't want to call them negative. These are uncomfortable emotions. Sadness is not something you're going to have anxiety about. It's more grieving, right? Now it may lead to anxiety, and then you have shame. It depends on how that what's coming up with that shame, but it doesn't. You can see there could be some daylight between shame and anxiety, and then you have helplessness. And again, with helplessness, you can see that okay, this is I am stuck here. I don't know what to do. I'm out of options. But it doesn't necessarily have to be anxiety. And then you have anger. And this is when people experience, because some of these will generalize up into anger. A lot of times people are angry because they display anger, but it's because they are fearful, and that could be vulnerability. And vulnerability, again, it doesn't have to equal anxiety. Vulnerability is a is an emotion, and it's uncomfortable, but there's daylight between vulnerability and anxiety, and then there's embarrassment. Same thing with embarrassment, right? You have daylight between that and anxiety. It doesn't have to equal anxiety. But you can see how all of these e- uncomfortable emotions can lead someone to want to lash out. This is when we talk about a person is displaying anger, but it's because they're afraid, or it's because they're insecure. You can see how these can make a person feel insecure. That insecure could lead to in, the insecurity could lead to anxiety, which then can lead to anger, or could lead to withdrawal. It could lead to fight or flight, freeze or faint. And then we have disappointment and frustration. So, a quick exercise you can do right now just to experience this, and don't do anything heavy right now. We're in an event here, but it gives you an idea of how this works. You'll experience how it works. Come up with any emotion that you've experienced in the last day or two. Something that's an uncomfortable emotion. Forget about this list for a minute. Just an uncomfortable emotion. And when you get it, I want you to first notice, where is it in your body? Because if it's an emotion that's still sitting with you, it's probably somewhere in your system. It could be in your gut, your shoulders, your neck. Think about, where is this emotion. Now I want you to get calm, take some deep breaths, but still thinking about that emotion. Just breathe. Now notice, as you locate that emotion, I want you to lean into it, get curious, and say, what is this emotion telling me? What is that emotion? What's the signal from that emotion? Get curious about it. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this emotion? Is it there to tell me something? If I don't want to feel this emotion again in the future, what are some things I can do differently? How can I approach things differently if I don't want this emotion? So again, now come back out of that, take a deep breath. That was just one example. Hopefully you kind of experienced it. And now we're going to go to the next level. So the next level would be, you want to, in this emotional modulation step, what are we doing about it? We're going to see it as a signal. So you have sadness, loss of meaning; shame, self image threat; helplessness, I'm out of options; anger, a boundary's been crossed; vulnerability, I'm open or exposed; embarrassment, social exposure; disappointment, expectation unmet; and frustration, the effort is not producing. Now, if you're tracking with me, we're back to this 7 steps. We're dealing with this within 90 seconds. So on one of those pages, I showed that step 5 is 0 to 90 seconds. So the whole stimulus response cycle should be under a second. But if you have to check in and do an emotional modulation, you'll be adding 0 to 90 seconds to that. You'll get good enough. If you practice this, you will get good enough that this is automatic. It becomes habitual, and as soon as the thing comes up, you go through this process. So now there's a signal. Now, if you think about it, as if we were just talking about if we were just talking about anxiety, you can see how each of these can lead to anxiety. And then, does it really give you that much information about what to do? Certainly, by having loss or meaning, you have a better idea of what you can do. But here's an example. So, what I'm going to tell you is, I use 3 L's. Locate the emotion. That's exactly what Joan Rosenberg talks about. Where is it in your body? Label the emotion. So we're going to label it with one of these eight. Now, Joan says that all uncomfortable emotions can be generalized down into these eight, reduced to these eight. We don't want to suppress them because we suppress the joyous emotions. And one of the benefits of labeling them is that you can start to see daylight between uncomfortable emotions that are teaching you something where you need to change versus uncomfortable emotions which are actually excitement. So excitement and anxiety have the same signature. And as we start going, I talked about transformation, as we start breaking out of that status quo and moving up, we run into this barrier that is has the effect of holding us back, because the amount of cognitive dissonance that we have to work through to get through that barrier, because we have all the stories, the beliefs, the habits, the imposter syndrome, the feelings, the values, the deep-seated thoughts. All of this comes together to keep us from being able to get through that. That's why I use the seven-step process, because we have to keep using it to get through that transformation barrier. And that same and some of that cognitive dissonance is coming because of excitement. We're excited because we're about to have what we decided, what we set out to, and but now we're getting it, and this is where people start talking about, oh, I got jinxed. They're thinking, it's, don't jinx yourself, because when that excitement happens, same signature as anxiety, it starts firing off anxiety emotions, or neurons, neural pathways, and the neurons that fire together wire together. The next thing you know, you're thinking that I'm in a problem, and this is actually a good thing. It's actually goodness. So by labeling it, you're able to step away from it, from focusing on what are excitement type emotions, and then to learn from what can we learn from it. So as I said, you're going to go through. So what really matters to me? If I'm sad about that, I feel loss in meaning. Okay, something's gone. Is it time to let go? You can't get to second base without leaving first. And a lot of times, this is just a matter of you have to clear the past to move forward. An easy example that most people can get: we've all cleaned out closets, garages, whatever, and you decide, you know what? I've been moving this thing around for 5 years. I haven't used it. I'm throwing it away. Well, when you throw it away, the anxiety about that you should keep it fires off neural pathways, and within a day or two, you will most likely come up with the use for that thing. It's not that a use for that thing really came up; it's that the bar was so low for a use to be connected that you tap into that. And it's if you know that that's what's happening, then it doesn't bother you. Throw the thing away when it shows up. I was expecting it. It's the same way goal setting works. You set a goal, and now you have this serendipity that makes you notice things that are helping you towards the goal. Other people might set a goal, and because they're thinking that it's not available to them, they immediately come up with obstacles. So this is all conditioned. This is all happening in that steps 3 or 4, which is why I say that's where the change happens. But you enable it with steps 1 and steps 5, and then if it's shame, you realign your values. Helplessness, where can you simplify things, right? The human mind can only hold 7 to 9 chunks of information. And when you exceed that, it gets into what people think of as overwhelm. So I've removed the feeling of overwhelm. I've gotten rid of it because that feeling was replaced. I use transformational vocabulary, that when that feeling comes up, I automatically think of it, oh, it's time to rechunk. It's time to prioritize. So what I'm doing is I've conditioned in a step where I'm automatically grouping things together, and it keeps me out of overwhelm, and I'm able to continue managing. I don't get the anxiety. My point is, if you locate the emotion, you you label it, and then you learn from it. What am I supposed to learn from this? Anger, boundary was crossed, rule was broken. So you set limits with that person, or if it's something external, you may have to reset your expectations. You can't control other people, and that's the point of the 7 performance areas. that I talk about on the right side, and I'll close with that slide. Then vulnerability, there's a growth opportunity. Embarrassment, practice humility. It's okay. I changed my word. I don't experience embarrassment. I changed it to amuse. That was amusing. If I screw up, oh, it was amusing, right? Because you're speaking in public, you're on stage, you're doing things are going to happen, and you can't get you. You have to learn from it, but I call it amusing. That was amusing. Sometimes I use the word interesting, but I don't have the emotion of embarrassment. Why? Because I don't want it slowing me down. Disappointment. Adjust your expectations. I'm big on this one. People have all these goals and these things that they want to do, and they're not able to get to it, and they're not willing to let go of some priorities. Everything's the number one priority. You can't do that. Adjust your expectations, and then you can see progress there. It's so competitive, and with technology going on, you don't have the luxury of having five different high priority items. You're much better off having one priority five different times, and then refining the strategy. So I wanted to come back to this slide because the left side is in our control 100%. When you learn to modulate the emotion, again, you can check out Jones' book, 90 Seconds to a Life You Love. You'll get a handle on this, and you have to practice. It's not knowing. Knowing and not doing is just like not knowing. You have to practice it. These are habits. Your current system of taking an uncomfortable emotion and turning it into a neurobiological event is a habit. You have to break that habit, and you break the habit in small steps. It can be used with the positivity exercise. You can actually use this in conjunction with the positivity exercise I talked about in step three, and work through all those negative emotions that have been coming up. It's a 6 week process, and literally remove those associations so you're not so easily triggered. And then the right side is what we want: relationships, professional, and financial. These are not in our control, only what we do. But there, I need another person involved when it comes to relationship. Professional, buyers need sellers, sellers need buyers. Or you're serving somebody, you need somebody to serve. You're being served, you need somebody to serve you. These are these require other people. So you have to spend your time becoming the kind of person that this is a logical, natural outcome. Same with financial. If you start going after finances first without becoming, this is the lottery thing, right? People win a lottery, and within 2 years they're back to where they were, if not worse. That's emotion. So I started out by saying steps one, beliefs, neuroplasticity, priming, mindset, and physiology. And step five, modulating your emotions. These are the two that I stand behind when I tell you that you can be anyone you want to be. You do not have to live with your current habits. You do not have to live with your current personality. Now, the you is the person who can design the personality. The and the I should say the higher self is the you that can design the personality you want. The you is the one who sort of programs the programming, and the programming is the subconscious. So we have to take the subconscious and keep it where it is, which is sub is for below, and make sure that the conscious mind is governing the subconscious. And you get there with the seven steps. And the seven performance areas is what I came up with initially. So the seven steps was a in an effort to help people get there faster, because some people get stuck on one of those areas, and the 7 step reset enabled me to do laps. So I say let's do laps around the mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and get better and better and better. But sometimes you have to do laps around the physical with 7 step reset. So you're doing laps within laps. You do that, now you have the relationship, professional, financial. And when it gets over to that area, I follow principles. I don't have to do there's so much research out there, and most people are not using a fraction, only using a fraction of what they actually know. So we don't want to spend time with more information. We want to spend time on using what you decide is important. And that's what we do here. And tomorrow, we'll talk about action. And the action step, I'll introduce some infographics to kind of show you a path forward. Once you decide that you are in charge and in command of your life, then where are we going to go for information? The infographics do a great job of capsulizing best practices. And I would say pick one or two or three infographics and lean into that, and use the habit change formula, the 7-step reset, to develop in that infographic. Don't start with the infographic. Start with your purpose. Start with your quest. Start with what it is that you want. Who do I have to become? And then what am I going to do to enable that? That's it. Tomorrow I will go into the action step, and you'll find this and other videos at 7stepreset.com/live, and you'll find that in the chat or in the comments on whatever platform you're watching this. All right. See you.